following podcast contains mature language and discussions that are not suitable for younger audiences. The opinions voiced in this podcast are our own. We are not experts on the topic we present, but have conducted our own research. Listener discretion is advised. When it comes to UFO sightings and claims, most of the stories are heard from witnesses, which could be argued as hearsay. But what if I told you that there was a case close to Ottawa near the small town of Carp, Ontario, where there was actually evidence of a UFO? Prominent UFO investigators in Canada and the United States received a mysterious package from someone who called themself Guardian. The package contained a VHS tape. This tape is considered to be one of the most controversial pieces of UFO evidence in Canadian history. But is this Guardian tape the truth or just an elaborate hoax? This is the Strange and Undecided podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Strange and Undecided podcast. I'm your host, Jarrett. Pat was abducted by aliens, so it's just going to be me for this show. As always, we have an interesting case for you tonight, so let's just get right into it. Our story tonight begins in the small town of Carp, Ontario. This town lies within the area of West Carleton, which is a historic township located 33 kilometers or 20 miles from the city of Ottawa. It is also located a mere 65 kilometers or 40 miles from the United States-Canadian border. The town of Carp is described as compact and quiet, consisting mostly of wealthier families with a small population of around 2,000 people. One of the more interesting features of this town is Canada's Cold War Museum, formerly known as the Diefenbunker. The Diefenbunker was a top-secret underground bunker that was built between 1959 and 1961 to house high-ranking government officials in the event of a nuclear attack on Ottawa. Until 1999, the Diefenbunker also had a satellite communication station, or SATCOM, on the roof which provided communications between all NATO countries. But could it have been used for communication with something else? Something extraterrestrial? Despite the town's small size, it has a notable history when it comes to strange events, particularly UFOs. The interest in this small town began when a man by the name of Tom Theophanous, working with the Canadian UFO Research Network, also known as QFORN, received an unusual package in the mail. The package had no return address and was sent by someone who called themselves Guardian. Inside the package was a letter written using a typewriter claiming that an alien craft was recovered from a swamp in the area of West Carleton near Ottawa, Canada, and had involved efforts from both Canada and the United States to recover it. Along with the letter were photographs of what Guardian claimed were aliens. Guardian stated that the US and Canadian troops seized parts of the crashed craft as well as bodies of aliens and whisked it away to a secret base in Canada, Ontario, which is only an 18-minute drive from the alleged scene of the crash. These claims were interesting to say the least and therefore demanded an investigation. A man by the name of Graham Lightfoot, who was a UFO researcher from Ottawa, was sent to assess the claims and determine if they could be validated. He began by speaking to residents in the area that Guardian had mentioned and was able to interview some of them. He asked them if they had witnessed anything unusual the night of November 4th, 1989. One resident named Diane Labinek talked about what she experienced that night. She claimed to have witnessed an intense bright light pass over in the sky above her and was quickly heading towards a swamp located just south of her home at the far end of a field. She then witnessed an explosion as she suspected the object crashed but couldn't see it directly. Another resident stated how their cattle ran away after being startled by something. They weren't sure what exactly. But it caused a problem nonetheless and took them a while to recover all of the cattle again the next day. Another couple in the town described witnessing a bright light that shone through their bathroom window. They said, "It reached right down our hallway." They recalled hearing the sound of helicopters that evening as well. Moving back to Diane Labinek, she also stated that she saw helicopters flying over the area and low to the ground. However, these eyewitness reports needed to be validated. There was no evidence of a crash discovered in the swampy area described by the residents and also by Guardian. Without actual proof of a crashed UFO and no photographic evidence, the case was determined to be nothing more than a hoax and that Guardian was a fraud. The letter that was sent along with the photos by Guardian read like science fiction. Here's a small excerpt from the document, and keep in mind when listening to this, these aren't my words. I am simply quoting this. Quote, Canadian and American security agencies are engaged in a conspiracy of silence to withhold from the world the alien vessel seized in the swamps of Corkery Road, Carp, in 1989. All individuals implanted by aliens are classified as zombies. The zombies have been programmed to help overthrow mankind in the near future. The alien forces with their Chinese and Arab allies will attack within the next 5 years. End quote. On top of that, the alien photos look like nothing more than someone wearing a dark outfit with a white ski mask standing in a field in the dark. And with that, the interest in the case went away. But not for long. A couple years later, on the night of August 18th, 1991, Diane Labinek was busy putting her children to bed while her husband had left to run some errands. At approximately 10 p.m., she was interrupted by her dogs barking at something outside. She walked through her house to the back window to see what was causing the dogs to bark. She looked out in the backyard, and in the distance, she could see red flames and smoke coming from the field. The red flames were described by her as non-spreading, and she didn't believe it to be fire because it didn't grow or move. It just stayed in one spot. Above the red flames, she then saw what she described as an unidentified object in the sky descending towards the flames. Looking at the object, she saw a blue flashing light on top and another bright light on the underside. The craft slowly came down and landed next to the flames. She sat and watched, completely transfixed for around 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, the object lifted off the ground and moved out of sight behind some trees, and then disappeared. As quickly as the object disappeared, the red flames disappeared as well. Diane described being completely frightened by what she saw and wanted to call the police, but she decided not to as she figured that nobody would take her seriously. Another 10 minutes passed after the object in the flames disappeared, and she watched as a helicopter was flying low to the ground and it raced towards the area where the flames had appeared. The helicopter maneuvered around the area, seeming like it was looking for something. It then flew over her house and disappeared into the night. Early the next day, Diane was determined to see what had happened. She ran out to the area she had seen the strange red flames in, as well as the object, in hopes of finding evidence of what she saw. She was unable to find any indication of marks, burns, or indentations in the ground to explain what had happened the previous night. She never ended up telling anybody outside of her family about what she saw. Understandably, she was upset that she didn't find any evidence, and she knew that no one would believe her without proof. This event was now the second unusual sighting she witnessed in West Carleton. Unbeknownst to Diane, she would have a chance to tell her story soon enough. 6 months after Diane witnessed the event, Guardian returned after going silent for a couple of years, and they had upped their game this time around. Q4 received a series of packages from Ottawa, and once again with no return address. The first package contained documents detailing more reports of UFO crashes in the West Carleton area. Guardian also sent documents that were apparently from Canada's Department of National Defence, or DND. The second package contained Polaroids of potential UFOs, along with numerous diagrams explaining how alien spaceships were able to evade radar systems, hence why they have been undetected to this point. The last package was what really piqued everyone's interest and what makes this case infamous. A VHS tape with a printed label on the front reading Guardian. Next to the name was a fingerprint, presumably belonging to Guardian. Also in the package was a photocopied map of the area where the event took place, West Carleton. The footage found on the VHS tape showed that it was nighttime, and the person filming was looking at something bright in the distance. There was a cluster of brightly burning red flames on the ground, and they weren't spreading. They looked like flares. A disc-shaped object can be seen hovering just to the right of the red flames. The object was emitting a bright glow from its underside and had a rapidly pulsing blue light on top. The entire video has no sound, but at one point, the distant sound of barking dogs could be heard. For those interested, I will post the video in the show notes for you to watch. One of the researchers that received this package was a man from Edgewater, Maryland named Bob Exler. Exler is a well-known UFO researcher and is a former NASA mission specialist. After he viewed the tape, he stated that it was among the most convincing pieces of evidence of a UFO that he had seen in his 12 years of research on the topic. From the video, he was able to see that the object had a disc-like shape due to the flashing blue light on top, showing that it was curved. Based on his assessment, he felt that there was truth to this event, which occurred in a real field and was not staged in a prop room or a set. Exler decided to launch his own investigation into what was going on. In his research, he discovered that 2 years earlier, some prominent Canadian ufologists had received material from someone calling themselves Guardian. Guardian claimed that the event had allegedly occurred in the same area on November 4th, 1989. Exler was so intrigued by this that he decided to go to West Carleton himself. He teamed up with UFO researcher Graham Lightfoot, who I introduced earlier. Together, they interviewed more people to see if they saw anything the night of August 18th, 1991. One of the people interviewed was Diane Labinek. She was asked about what happened that night, and to their astonishment, she was able to describe the exact sequence of events that unfolded on the tape. Keep in mind, at this point, Diane had not seen the tape and was not shown it until afterwards. Lightfoot felt that her description of what she saw was so accurate and detailed that she could not have faked it. She was finally shown the tape and was shocked as it accurately depicted the exact thing that she saw. She was also happy as she felt vindicated as the tape verified what she saw and that she wasn't going crazy. Diane might have remained silent about her 1991 sighting, if not for this VHS tape. That was enough to bring a film crew from the show Unsolved Mysteries to the little town of Carp. The show interviewed Exler and some others who had witnessed the event, including Diane. It featured a recreation of what Diane saw that night, and she was actually allowed to play herself. But the highlight was the Guardian video, in which host actor Robert Stack, the voice of Unsolved Mysteries, indicated that this tape was to be shown for the first time ever on national television. I will also be posting this episode in the show notes for those of you who are interested. Besides Exler and Unsolved Mysteries, other important figures were also investigating the Guardian UFO tape. Dr. Bruce Maccabee was one of them. As a United States Navy physicist and photo analyst, he had studied the UFO phenomenon for many years. He was able to examine the tape and concluded that he did not believe it to be a hoax. He even added that it was the clearest video that he had seen to date, and he was actually able to see the structure of the object. Maccabee was drawn to the bright blue light strobing on top of the craft because it was blinking so fast. Comparing it to other commercial aircraft, it was running much faster than their strobe. He estimated it was running at approximately 7 cycles per second versus normal aircraft that run at 1 or 2 cycles per second. He was also impressed by the lighting in the video. Whoever had shot the footage was clearly trying to get closer to the object, and as they got closer, the lights became brighter. Maccabee estimated the size of the object and determined it to be around 20 to 30 feet in diameter. Exler's take on the size of the object was that since it was so big, there was no possible way it could be a hoax. He felt that due to the sheer size that it would have been virtually impossible to set everything up in the dark. Evidence of this setup would have been spotted in a daytime setting like movement of generators, somebody hauling cables, or noticeable equipment being transported to the location. Diane surely would have spotted something like this during the day. If you think back to what I mentioned earlier, the tape was mostly silent besides one part where you can hear dogs faintly barking in the background. Generators and equipment would make a lot of noise to power the lights, and nothing like that could be heard on the video. Dr. Robert Nathan from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory was also another person looking into the mysterious Guardian tape. He could not provide an explanation of what he saw. He was also puzzled by the accounts of low-flying helicopters going over West Carleton on a regular basis since the sighting in 1991. The helicopters were black, green, or maroon in color, but more importantly, they were unmarked and had tinted windows. When asked about the helicopter activity, the Canadian military denied any involvement. They stated that military helicopters are not authorized to fly that low. They also would not be flying over civilian-populated areas and instead would be running their training courses approximately 30 miles or 50 kilometers west of the town. The appearance of these helicopters, as well as where they came from, remains a mystery to this day. So at this point in time, you've heard points that argue that the event was real and how this is essentially proof of a UFO. These were not the only opinions going on, however. There was a lot of criticism and hesitation in believing this event was real, and many believed it to be nothing more than a hoax. Even Bob Exler was convinced at one point it was a hoax, and he's advocating on the side of it being a real UFO sighting. He stated, quote, "This is either an extraordinary top-secret flying vehicle of somebody's government, or it is of non-human origin," end quote. The Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, investigators examined the case and concluded that it was a hoax. Despite this, Exler pushed on. When Exler and Lightfoot began their investigation together, they theorized that this could have been a hoax since Diane Labinek was involved in both events, the one from 1989 and this one from 1991. It seems odd that a single person gave the most information about two different events, and some even theorized that Diane was Guardian. Exler and Lightfoot did, however, scrap that theory after getting to know Diane. They stated that it was very unlikely that she was involved in a hoax and deemed her simply an observer. Looking at the contents of the packages sent by Guardian, there are some inherent red flags. The alleged military documents that were assembled with the tape raised serious questions about their authenticity, as well as Guardian's credibility. The military documents read more like science fiction than anything else, as the papers described a conspiracy involving UFOs, Red China, and nuclear weapons. Lightfoot added that the stories Guardian had written to explain the event and why it was happening seemed very far-fetched. The eyewitness accounts were more credible and more reliable. Exler did his due diligence and went to the Department of National Defense to try and verify the authenticity of the alleged classified documents. He was told that they were counterfeits. The military official, Major Patterson, reviewed the document and told Exler that the document was fabricated and that there were too many errors to make it authentic. He even went as far as to say that anyone putting in very little effort could have done better than this. Exler was asked by a reporter for the Skeptics UFO newsletter, or Sun, if he believed that the document was a counterfeit, and he replied, "Absolutely." But this was still not enough to make him cease his investigation. Also included on the tape were strange images at the end of the video, in which Guardian claimed to show an alien. Exler determined that the alien he was seeing simply appeared to be somebody dressed up in a costume. But why? The video itself was compelling enough. Why would Guardian add fake images of aliens and ruin the credibility? Despite the split in opinions, everybody was perplexed with the identity of Guardian. Who were they, and why were they doing this? Let's talk about the contents of the video. Some mysterious individual just so happened to be in a remote field late at night with a video camera and just at the right time to film a UFO sighting? This definitely cannot be chalked up to good luck. According to Exler, the person filming this would have had prior knowledge that this event was going to take place. He believes that Guardian is connected to the event in some way, possibly a member of the military or some other organization. He also mentioned that there was no way it could have been a casual motorist driving by that happened to have a video camera with them and were able to catch everything on film. Based on the topography of the area, a person on the road would not have been able to see the flames. One running theory suggests that Guardian is one of Diane Labenek's neighbors. However, after interviews, they could find no evidence that supported that theory. Some have even gone as far as to believe that Exler is Guardian and was trying to create attention and look like a superhero in the UFO community. Following the event in November of 1992, Graham Lightfoot met with a man who believed he knew who Guardian was. A man named Bobby Charlebois, a friend of his who had an interest in UFOs and had called himself in the past Guardian. This was confirmed by other people who knew him as well. Diane Labenek was one of them who stated that he was a good friend of hers who visited frequently. Interestingly enough, when UFO researchers tried to obtain a fingerprint from Bobby to compare to the fingerprint on the VHS tape, he was evasive and refused. It is not known if his fingerprint was ever compared. In February of 1993, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or the RCMP, opened an investigation into Diane's claims of low-flying helicopters near her house. The RCMP found through their interviews that some neighbors reported seeing helicopters in the area, but none of them reported seeing them flying low to the ground like Diane had claimed. After the RCMP investigation, Exler had found a witness who claimed to have seen what Diane had seen the night of August 18, 1991. But the witness also claimed to have been abducted by the object. Here's where things take a turn. MUFON investigators did not believe the witness's story, and their version was erratic and inconsistent over time. Diane was even looked into by MUFON, and they were skeptical about her own credibility. When Unsolved Mysteries came to interview and film her for the TV show, she stated that she had no interest in UFOs. However, in the episode that aired, you can actually see in the background there's a bookshelf behind her, and on that bookshelf are UFO books. In September of 1994, Exler officially retired from investigating UFOs. By then, a large number of people in the UFO community had distanced themselves from him due to how he handled the case. In August of 1995, the Ontario branch of MUFON released a conclusive report. The report stated that they believed the case was nothing more than a hoax. MUFON and several other experts said that Diane Labenek used her nephew's truck, attached lights to it, and staged the object shown in the tape. Now you're probably asking, nephew's truck, where did that come from? In previous interviews, they asked Diane about different members of her family, and it came up in conversation that her nephew had a white truck. So MUFON believed that this was used in the, quote, hoax. With a small amount of special effects and the fact that it was nighttime, they could have easily made the truck look like a flying saucer. MUFON believed that the Labeneks, Charlebois, and potentially other people were involved in setting up this hoax. They also went so far as to point a finger at Exler and said that he knew it was a hoax, but ignored the fact for his own benefit and financial gain. Despite these accusations, Diane, Exler, and other UFO researchers still insist that the incident was real and not a hoax. MUFON has never been able to determine who Guardian was, though. To this day, the identity of Guardian is unknown, and much like the show this event was featured on, will most likely remain an unsolved mystery. Having no contact with Guardian is probably the biggest frustration to an investigation like this. We don't know who Guardian is, what Guardian represents. We don't know if Guardian was sent or went on his own. We have no idea what the solution to many of these mysteries are going to be. We may never know. Exler said this in an interview in 1991, and he believes Guardian is the key to this entire case. Exler passed away on June 6, 2020 at the age of 71. I think he would be happy to know that the interest in this case is still out there and people are actively investigating. Toronto filmmaker Nick Crow planned to travel to West Carleton and examine the Guardian UFO case. Crow was more interested in finding out why somebody went through so much trouble to do this and what is the real story behind it versus did a UFO actually land here. He produced a documentary on this called UFO Town. If you are interested in watching this 45-minute video, I will also be posting that in the show notes. Despite questionable images of aliens and fabricated classified documents, many experts believe that the 1991 UFO event in West Carleton was in fact real. Many others concluded that it was an undeniable and elaborate hoax. But what actually happened in the fields of West Carleton? Many longtime residents in the area say it was nothing more than military training exercises at night due to how close the Defen bunker was. At this point in time, we cannot deny that something strange happened in this location. All we are left with in the wake of the event is questions. Questions, once again, only Guardian can answer. So that is the case of the Guardian UFO, and that's going to end our show for the night. If you have any ideas for the show or want your story featured, please email us at strangeandundecided@gmail.com. As always, thanks for listening, and good night.